this is the philosophy of astrology, is that we have co-created this lesson plan before we arrive on Earth. And there's a great Pixar movie called Soul, which animates this, and it's just as entertaining for adults as it is for children. And it's really, I was like, somebody at Pixar's really plugged in because it explains this. And it's, why two people can have the exact same birth data and live very different lives.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to another edition of Soul Explorers. Today we have with us Hilary Harley. She's a mystic specializing in astrology, holistic healing, and the Akashic records. Hilary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gary and Sally, for having me today.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. And it's been so lovely meeting you and getting to know you. If you can, tell us just a little bit about how you ended up on this spiritual path, just a little bit of your background.
So I was raised in a very traditional family and went to church, and nothing unusual. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was very interested in astrology. So when I was little, she introduced me to astrology, and I put it away for a long time. And then, as I explained to a lot of people, these paths, these spiritual paths, choose you probably more than you choose them, or in equal measure. And so astrology started calling me really strongly in my early to mid 30s. And I came to a crossroads where I was like, do I ignore this or do I pursue this? And it felt really juicy and delicious and yummy every time I thought about it or read an astrological book. And so I was blessed because in Boston, where I was living at the time, there are lots of astrologers and classes and bookstores, metaphysical bookstores. So I was able to nurture my budding interest and really grow and develop. And I began seeing clients, astrology clients, in 2001, and have built a global practice since then, 22, 23 years later, and added Reiki and the Akashic Records over the years. In 2016 and 2018, I added those modalities because they offer a richer experience both for me and for my clients.
So let me ask you one more quick question then. What was it specifically about astrology that really pulled you in, that kind of you felt that pull? Was there something about that particular modality that spoke to you?
Yes. So, astrology is essentially a way of explaining and understanding ourselves through archetypes. And the archetypes really resonated. So, when I say archetypes, I mean the sun signs, Aries through Pisces. And they represent energies. And the energies really made a lot of sense to me, and I understood them intuitively. It just felt like, anything that we're really good at, whether it's cooking or sewing or painting or any kind of vocation that we enjoy or avocation that we enjoy, that is how it felt to me. It just felt super clear, very natural, and I had an affinity for it. So I just wanted to pursue it because it made my heart and my soul light up whenever I could speak the language. Astrology is really a language of signs and symbols, and it's not mysterious once you start studying it. It does take some practice, but it felt really just beautiful and soul fulfilling and soul filling as I grew my practice and started to study it more and more.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your approach and what comments can you make about the Akashic records? Now, is this tied to the astrology or is it something separate and apart?
Astrology, uh, we each have a natal birth chart, which is a blueprint or a GPS system that we are born with based on our time, date, and location of our birth. It's like a point in time and space. And that birth chart, that astrological birth chart, is part of the Akashics rather than the Akashics being a part of astrology. So if you go into the Akashics, you can pull, it's like the internet. It's the information superhighway. You can pull anything from the Akashics, visual, audio, energetically, it's all of the clairs, clairsentient, clair-knowing, everything. And so the astrology records, the charts, you're able to pull out of the Akashics. Now, I'm able to create an astrological chart using software because we're in the 21st century. So I just plug in the time, date, and location coordinates, and I have an astrological chart. The reason I incorporated the Akashics was because it expands, it opens up what I am able to perceive about the client and what I'm able to share with them. So my downloads are clearer, the information is richer, and it just provides a more detailed and fulfilling read for both me and the client.
Which leads me to a question I was going to ask you anyway about how much of you sitting with a person to give a reading is intuitive in nature and how much of it is sort of the codified language of astrology.
That's a great question, Sally. So when I sit down to read for a client, I start with their astrological chart. And that's because that's the modality that I'm trained most intensively in and have the most experience in. So astrology is both an art and a science. It's the science of astronomy and the stars and the relationship that they make to one another and the angles. And the art is the interpretation, the intuitive interpretation. The Akashics come into it before I do a reading. I print out a birth chart and then I Reiki the chart, and then I open the Akashic records. And I find that the Reiki opens the heart center because astrology is an extremely cerebral modality. It is the intellectual modality of all the metaphysical gifts that we have. And Reiki is the opposite or the other end of the spectrum. It's very heart centered. It has nothing to do with the mind. It is soul guidance, really. It's energetic. And then the Akashics adds this other layer over it where it's pulling in everything else, whether it's heart centered energy or whether it's more mental and cerebral energy. It's visual, audio, it's data that, it's clear knowing. I get specific wording to tell people when I open the Akashics. So it's a combination of these three modalities that I find is a perfect trio, troika, and they overlap, not in a distinguishable way. They merge together seamlessly in my experience, and I don't like to do one without the other. I can do one without the other. I mean, I've been a hospice Reiki practitioner which has nothing to do with the Akashics or astrology. And certainly I read for many years astrological charts without integrating the Reiki or the Akashic. If it's just astrology that I am doing, say a quick read for somebody without opening the Akashics or Reikiing the chart, there is a lot of intuition involved, but it's also, I'd say, equal parts training, because you understand the angles, say, Mars is making to the sun by sign, by astrological sign, and by house. And, that's where one astrologer is going to differ from another astrologer. But ideally, by sign and by house, these angles that the planets are making, there is a reference point that is similar, information that's going to be shared.
So you're actually utilizing both left and right brain modalities here, which
Yes.
come together as a whole. Well,
Yes.
I have another question for you. Let's get into the meat of this a little bit. We keep hearing that we're on the verge of a major shift.
We are.
Now, I hear 2024 is a critical year, and
It
there are
is.
some people say this shift is going to happen in the next couple of years. Some people say it's 100 years off. What does astrology tell you about what we're going through at this time? And I keep hearing that the month of April is critical.
It's huge. It's huge.
Oh, good. So we'll let you run with that a little bit because it's a subject on a lot of people's minds.
Yes. So first, we have just had the planet Pluto enter Aquarius. And Pluto is the farthest planet from the sun. It is about transformation. We transform through our desires. So Pluto rules our desires, and it's what's calling our name. And we transform by, ooh, that shiny object we want over there. Say it's a really nice car. We want that car. Well, how do we get that car? We have to figure out a way to pay for it. So we might take on another job. We might bring in supplemental income somehow. Anyway, that is how we transform Pluto. It's the driver. It's like an accelerator, a gas pedal that is like, ooh, internally revving our engines. So Pluto finished in Capricorn and it entered Aquarius. It's been doing this dance because it's an outer planet. So it finished in the sign of Capricorn last year and it entered the sign of Aquarius this year. It's going to stick its toe back into Capricorn in September and October. But for the balance of 2024, it's going to be in Aquarius. So we talk about the age of Aquarius. We are officially in the age of Aquarius now. Aquarius is very different than Capricorn, where Pluto was for since 2008. So it takes 15 to 20 years for Pluto, because it's so far away from the sun, to move through these signs. So Capricorn is black and white. What works, what doesn't work. It's big government, big business. So we saw the crash during Pluto. We saw COVID during Pluto, systems, long standing systems that have started to crumble. And then enter Pluto in Aquarius. Aquarius is about technology. It is about marching to your own drummer, groups, teams, networks. It is about the humanitarian. It is about the eccentric, avant-garde, anything unusual. It's about anything radical or rebellious. So to give you a frame of reference, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, the end of the American Revolution occurred and the French Revolution occurred. And you think about how that set the stage for where we are now as a society. And these are monumental shifts. I mean, it is about freedom in a way, you have the right to be you, you do you, I'm going to do me. And yet, as much as it's the mark of the individual, it is about operating as an individual within a group context. So you think about a band, a musical band, or a sports team. Each of those individual people have roles to play. And yet, when they're working together, they do very well. They play beautiful music, they win the game, or they do very well on the sports field. So that is Pluto in Aquarius. And this is only going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. This march toward individuality and the use of technology. I mean, certainly we've seen the rise of AI and chat GPT and all these things that didn't really exist a couple years ago. I mean, they were in the works, but they weren't out. And Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is the only planet that rotates vertically instead of horizontally. So this is about breakthroughs. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase, you got to break down to break through. This is what's going on. There are a lot of people that are not used to change, and Uranus and Aquarius are about change. They're about, Uranus is called the Great Awakener. So, when you get a planet like Pluto in the sign of awakening and change, this is like big change. It's upheaval. And so that's where we're going. And it's pushing everybody out of our comfort zones, not just, the elite or the downtrodden or, the middle sectors of our society. This is pushing everybody's buttons in some ways because we're being forced, called, really, if you invited, it would be a nice way of saying, to do life differently.
And radically so, correct?
Right. I mean, you think about every sector of our lives and where it's like you think back 5 years ago, and it's like we're on a different timeline and different frequencies. So it's uncomfortable. And yet the only way we make progress is through change. And the only constant is change in life. So it's like, kids, we got to get used to this because it's
Right.
like,
And that's what I was going to ask you because, human beings are just kind of naturally resistant to change. We don't change until it becomes too painful not to change.
right.
What do you tell people who are struggling with kind of these shifts that are occurring? Do you have any advice for giving them a little comfort or a little, way to look at it from a different perspective?
One step at a time, do what you can, understand that technology, I'm 59 and I'm a very different generation than certainly my kids. And it's like, what? It feels like this wall of technology. So it's here to stay. Do what you can. Take your time. There is no deadline. There's no rush. Ask for help. Ask for help. To a lot of people, me included, I want to do it all by myself. We're being invited again, or some would say forced, to reach across our differences and really embrace one another. And part of that is asking for help from our neighbor. So then the other change, if you want to talk about what's coming in April, Uranus, which I just spoke about, is joining up with the Titan Jupiter. So this is going to be a rock and roll month ahead. We kick off with the first eclipse on April 25th in the sign of Aries. It's a new moon eclipse. And so it's like things are really, I'm sorry, it is a full moon eclipse. So sorry, it's a full moon eclipse in Aries and Libra. And so that is, we're pushed out of the door. Aries is about things new. Libra, where the moon is about relationships. So that's the kickoff to some turbulence because eclipses are neither bad nor good, but they stir the ether. And where if they make a direct connection to a planet or an angle in your birth chart, in your astrological chart, it can be like, whoo, so there can, Aries is the god of war. So there can be some impulsivity and rash behavior, particularly with relationships where the moon is in Libra. Libra wants everybody to be nice and get along and be, the hostess with the mostest. And there's a real sort of upsetting the apple cart around the 25th. And then the 1st of April, Mercury, Messenger Mercury, I call it, goes retrograde. So that's not, again, bad thing, but it's a time of doing the RE words: rest, restore, research, renew, reflect. And it's springtime, right? Who wants to be doing those things? We want to get going. We want to plant our garden. We want to, you know, get outside and do. And yet there's this call to be more reflective. So I would say you want to practice these RE words, meaning spring cleaning, go for it. That is a really good, productive doing activity during Mercury retrograde, which lasts from April 2nd all the way till April 24th. And
Most of the
then,
month.
yeah, most of the month. And then there's this new moon solar eclipse on April 8th, and it is in Aries. And that is a real kick in the pants. So it is a potent time of new beginnings. So again, this is a lot of Aries energy. Aries is the warrior. It's about being a pioneer, trailblazer, the great initiator. It leaps and asks questions later. So just to watch what you're starting because the boats are rocking during April. And if you overcommit, you're going to underdeliver. So given that it's Mercury retrograde with this very strong solar eclipse that we're able to see from Texas all the way to Maine, I mean, it's cutting a swath of visibility in North America. You just want to take a breath and sleep on it and count to 10, walk around the block, and have a good think before you sign on the dotted line. And with that, I should remind everybody during Mercury retrograde, any Mercury retrograde, you want to hold off on purchases, big purchases. I'm not talking about going to the grocery store. I'm talking about buying cars, buying a house, signing significant contracts. Definitely want to hold off on buying any kind of technology device, cell phones, laptops, that kind of thing. Obviously, if they break down, you got to replace your washing machine. You have to replace your laptop. Get the warranty. This is one time you want to get the warranty. And then 2 weeks later, we have this huge culmination pairing of Uranus, the change agent, and which is if you pardon my French, the shit stirrer of the zodiac, and Jupiter, this titan of abundance, and they're in the sign of Taurus. So this is about tremendous upheaval, tremendous change. And it's also tremendous awakening. It's like, ta-da! There can be huge scientific breakthroughs. There can be, Taurus is about what you can see, feel, and touch. It's about values. So it's like, oh my gosh, why was I spending all this time, energy, and money on something that gives me no joy, or there's no return on investment? It's just a waste of my time. So there are going to be significant aha moments for everybody in this couple the middle 2 weeks of April. And I think this is what Gary was referring to when he said he's been hearing in his groups that he's connected to about a big change. And this, there's a lot of rocking and rolling. I mean, I just finished my April forecast for my audiences and my podcast, and it's just like, how do I break the news gently? Like, you'll be okay, but just this is 1 month where you might want to take it one day at a time, sometimes even 1 hour at a time, because there are tremendous shifts ahead.
Well, let's dive into that a little deeper. What I've been hearing a lot about, I mean, it's in books, it's on YouTube, it's channelers are saying that we're shifting from 3D to 5D consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
which would be essentially heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that's an overnight thing. What
No.
does astrology say about that? And where are we on the timeline to such an event transpiring? And it doesn't mean that everybody makes
Right.
that.
Right. So there's a very famous astrologer named Jeffrey Wolf Green. He's an evolutionary astrologer. And he essentially said of this time, which is rooted in his training with the Native Americans, that there's going to be 1/3 that ascends, meaning shifts into this 5D consciousness, 1/3 that's going to go crazy, and 1/3 that phases out. So that sounds pretty dire.
It does.
And
What do you mean by phases out?
they either are sidelined, there's a concept of living as a shadow person or a shadow personality, meaning you're not fully embodied. You're just going through the motions of being alive.
Oh, I know people like that.
We all do. So when I say, go crazy, or, I'm probably terribly paraphrasing Mr. Green's words, but it's a third, a third, and a third. And so this phasing out, going crazy group, 2/3 of the population, I don't want to say it's survival of the fittest, but they're sort of on hold. They're going to finish their cycle of life here on Earth and then phase out. And the third that is going to ascend, we're already beginning to shift into that energy. That started, I would say, when Jupiter and Saturn entered Aquarius. That was a while ago. I'm sorry, when Pluto and Saturn entered Aquarius in the fall, in December. That was really a shift in 2020.
I don't know how both of you feel, or everybody who might be listening to this, but it seems to me that time has sped up dramatically. Could just be I'm getting old. But does it seem like time is increasing in rate? Like your days are short and gone.
Yeah. My sister used to say, if I get one or two things done every day, I consider it a win. And that's how I'm starting to feel. I feel like, I just get up, and then the next thing I know, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm like,
Right.
where did my morning go? So, yeah, I mean, that time is definitely accelerated, and it's really moving forward.
And that would be our perception of time, because does
Right.
time even really exist? We have to question.
Right.
But
Right.
our perception of it, I have to say for myself, weeks feel like days, months feel
Right.
like weeks. I thought it was part of the aging process and the fact that I retired a year ago. And so I really don't know where I am anymore. So, what day of the week it is. So this 5D consciousness, this is the new Earth they talk about, correct?
Yes.
What does astrology say about the timeline? Is that like a 25-year transition, a 2-year transition?
So everything is divine timing, and astrology is the divine timing. It's the divine clock. So it tracks, it's a call and response. If you think about the planets aren't causing us to do anything because we have free will, but there is this continuous call and response. So we feel impelled rather than compelled by the stars. So, for example, Pluto shifting into Aquarius, we feel that. We feel an energetic difference in frequency, and it your timeline is different than my timeline, that is different than Sally's timeline. I mean, we're doing things at a rate that each of us feels comfortable with. And what I would say is you do want to watch in yourself and other people resistance, because there is a tremendous resistant force at play right now. People really dug in, not wanting to budge. And, that's their own lesson. Each of us has our own lesson. So, in terms of the new earth, I am told from everything that I read and all of my colleagues and conversations that we are now we're walking on the new earth. And I think that really, I don't want to say this is an evasive answer, but it really depends. It all comes down to your perspective and how you are experiencing those frequencies and integrating them. So, what I will say is, rest. I know, not even because of my age, just I am required, and my kids, I see it in them. I mean, they're 30 years younger than I am. I mean, they are requiring a significant amount of rest. And it's because energetically we're being pulled and twisted and contorted, whether we're conscious or unconscious of these forces at play. And so it's really demanding on our physical bodies and our as well as our souls, our etheric spirit.
One of the things I've dabbled in many of the things that you're talking about. And one of the ways that I always enjoyed thinking about it was that astrology kind of tells you the climate that you're working with, the energy of the space you're in. And, you're going to behave very differently in a snowstorm than you will in a heat wave, but it doesn't mean that you're forced to put on your coat. You choose to put on your coat, all right? And so rather than destiny, it's just kind of the climate or the environment that we're finding ourselves in. And then it's still up to us to make choices and take action. How do you utilize astrology when you're assisting people to understand what they're experiencing? What's kind of the basis behind how you describe to people how to use this information?
So astrology is a clock for sure, but it is also, it tells a story. It tells the person's story. So Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, he developed archetypes which were based on the 12 astrological archetypes. This is a very roundabout way to answer your question. And Myers-Briggs based their tests on Carl Jung's work. So many of us have either completed or were familiar with the Myers-Briggs test. So so they are based on Carl Jung's archetypes, which are based on the 12 astrological archetypes. And yes, these provide the setup, if you will. So the planets are the what. If you think of it as a theater, the planets are the what. The signs are the how, and the houses are the where. So what is operating, how it's operating, and where it's operating. So a question I get asked a lot is, okay, you have two twins and they're born, two children and they're born at the same exact time and in the same hospital, the setup is, they're born a minute apart, or they're not even born a minute apart. They're born at the same exact time. How can they be so different? Well, that's where nature versus nurture comes in. One is born to an immigrant family, one is born to, an Irish Catholic family that's lived here for generations. And they have very different imprints, psychological imprints. And that is where the free will comes into play. How the baby of the Irish Catholic family is going to respond to the stimula versus child of the other family. So each of us, if you think of it as a theater, and these our lives are essentially roles that we signed up to play, given certain constructs. I signed up to be born in Pittsburgh to parents who were older, with two older sisters. I this is the philosophy of astrology, is that we have co-created this lesson plan before we arrive on Earth. And there's a great Pixar movie called Soul, which animates this, and it's just as entertaining for adults as it is for children. And it's really, I was like, somebody at Pixar's really plugged in, because it explains this. And it's, why two people can have the exact same birth data and live very different lives.
And also in planning sort of a lifetime, it's an outline. I mean, we can go way off track, and people do, from what their original plan might be.
Right.
So yeah, that opens up so many possibilities of the direction your role in this lifetime can play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be dark in any way, but I'll give you an example. There are two famous birth charts at astrology conferences. We completely nerd out, and that's all we do, is we look at birth charts. And Mahatma Gandhi's birth chart is almost identical to Goebbels from the Nazi regime. And the way they lived their lives were completely different.
Right.
And so, there's a German family versus an Indian family. They're born very different places, but it's, that's where the nurturing, the psychological imprints, and free will really do come into play, because they're making choices. And so the reason we have reincarnation, or I don't want to speak blanketly across the board, but one of the reasons we have reincarnation is we either didn't have the opportunity, we ignored our lesson plan in past lives, and we're given this fresh opportunity at birth to accomplish a new lesson plan. To, it's a fresh start. It's like saying, okay, you failed second grade, but you get this new chance to do second grade over. And how are you going to go about that?
Reincarnation is an issue I grapple with because for me, we have evidence that the afterlife exists. We have hard, solid evidence. Anybody that does the research and looks at what's been compiled for the last century and a half, really, you get to the end of that, you probably are not going to deny that consciousness continues.
Right.
I think there are a lot of explanations for how reincarnation can take place.
Oh,
Um,
1,000%.
and my a question I'm really grappling with is, if we reincarnate, that sort of negates immortality. Because if you exist on the other side and then you go into another body, become a different person, that you no longer exists. You see what I'm saying?
I do. However, that's assuming that we are not able to live multiple lives in multiple places at the same
Same
time.
time. No, I totally agree. I'm not hard and fixed in
Right.
any of this.
And time's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the nature of the reality of time. And so we talk very linearly about all of these topics because that's the language we have.
Right.
But then to wrap your head around the idea that time might be the illusion and that everything is happening now gets you into much deeper water.
Yeah.
Right.
It's,
Right. Like,
it's
are we existing in different universes right now?
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
It
It's
can
an
become mind-boggling, and of course, the linear mind's not really ready for it. I just am always, and I never negate anything. I tend to hold things as tentative until I have more information or spirit shows me, that yeah. And so what I get from spirit is it does happen, but not in the way we think about it.
right. Right.
That's that's what I generally get. And I'm a researcher. I've read everything I can get my hands on. Uh,
Right.
and so when take an instance, Arthur Finley worked with John Sloan, who was an incredible medium. And when he would bring through higher beings, so to speak, they would say, no, it doesn't exist. But you
Hmm.
get people that cross over with a strong belief in reincarnation. Well, they're not a different person because they crossed over.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
so it's mind-boggling. It really is. So I really kind of just dove into that to get your perspective on it. But I can see that you're open to the fact that it can be many different possibilities of how it transpires. So
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is that Earth is a school and we are here to learn lessons. And the training I received is that the astrological birth chart we have is our lesson plan for this lifetime. Now, I do believe that Earth is one of the hardest schools because of the density and the severity. It is so linear and it is so heavy. And people who are empaths and intuitives can feel that density. And so it is not for the faint of heart, are these lifetimes that we're living right now.
they say when you cross over, they cheer you because this was, a lot of them don't want to do it on the other side. That we, we're held up as sort of heroes for taking on this earthly lifetime. And it's a school of hard knocks, no question about it. But it's also a place where we can play and have fun.
Oh, 1,000%. And the more we aim for joy, I mean, that's one of the things that I truly believe in my work is to leave my clients inspired and empowered. Because if we aim for joy, we're going to land hopefully with joy, but work does not have to be a four-letter word. It can be play, for another four-letter word. So hopefully we can find fulfilling ways to live our 8 hours a day between 9 to 5.
And just our interactions with people, there's great joy in that.
Yes,
If your energy is up and you're encountering people, they respond to that.
a
And
1,000%.
so I think that working on ourselves is so important. And all these tools like astrology, certainly Reiki, and everything you're talking about here are great tools to help us do that work on ourselves.
all of these archetypal systems, and of which astrology is one, are great for not only helping us look at what we came in to do and experience, but to see where our strengths are, not just our weaknesses or our shortcomings or the hard stuff that we've got to deal with, but also, what are our gifts and where can we really serve and give to humanity in the way that our soul provided for us by coming in under the energies that we did.
Right.
So that's what I love about these kinds of things and these discussions.
Yeah, and the astrological chart, it serves, as I mentioned, as a blueprint and as a GPS. Where are you going? You know, everybody wants to know what their purpose is. We all have a purpose. What is the North Star, the true North? And the astrological chart shows that where your destination is. Okay, like what did I sign up for, to do? And then it shows the blessings and the challenges that we are working through. So, why I'm good at certain things and you're good at different things. Some people are great at sales and some people are great at art, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive, but some people are great at both. Some people have tremendous physical challenges. Some people have relationship challenges. They're all different things. And so that's where discernment and judgment really come in, and remembering there before the grace of God go I, because how you're challenged is different than how I'm challenged. And same with blessings. So it's just to remember, like, okay, easy does it, folks. Like we're not all cut out of the same mold. Literally, that's a old adage, and it's so true because we're cut out of very different cloth, each of us, and our lessons are very different.
A friend of mine once said to me, she was struggling with, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? And I said, look at your feet. And she looked at her feet, and I said, your purpose is to be where your feet are. And
That's so true.
and then what you're supposed to be doing, if you're present, will
Mm-hmm.
unfold for you. So,
Yeah, that's so true.
Hilary, this has been extraordinary, a great conversation. I just absolutely loving it. Would you have a message that you would like to leave for our viewers concerning the times we're going into, what is going to transpire out of it, how to best take the ride? What would be your final message to folks?
Be very gentle with yourself, be very gentle with others, try not to judge others, and definitely be less judgmental or less critical of yourself. We're all doing the best we can, and just practice kindness as often as possible.
Beautiful, beautiful. And how can people find out more about you?
So my website is hilaryharley.com. Hilary is spelled with one L, hilaryharley.com. And you can also find me on my podcast, Mystical Messages. And I am on Facebook. I have 3 different pages on Facebook: Hilary Harley, Harley Holistic Healing, Hilary Harley Astrology. And I'm also on Instagram under Hilary Harley.
And we'll list all of that in the notations at the bottom.
Great.
So thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
It's been
Yes.
just a real treat, and
Thank
sort of
you.
out of my wheelhouse. So I learned something. So that's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I absolutely love talking about astrology. So I really, really enjoyed the time we spent with you. Thank you, Hilary.
Anytime. Thank you both.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.